And I think the one thing that we take away, I know we'll get onto the money, but the one thing we'll take away is the fact that it wasn't hitherto a structure in previous times, whereas Rugby Europe now has a structure. It has a rugby. In fact, there's 5 tiers in Rugby Europe. It's got the championship, and then it's got the trophy, Conference 1, Conference 2, and then a development league.
So the Level 1 Championship, the top 6 ranked European teams outside the Six Nations contest an annual title, and this replaces the former Division 1A. Level 2, which is the trophy, are the next 6 ranked European teams who bid for a trophy, and this will replace the former Division 1B. Level 3, which is the conference, which Joe explained before, where 20 teams are separated into 2 conferences made up of 10 teams each, based on their previous year's rankings. Each conference is then split into 2, North and South, where teams could change every year depending on the competing teams. Nations closest to the boundary move from North to South and vice versa each season as necessary.
So they need to think outside the box and think about the wider game. It's a massive problem in cricket at the moment with the big 3. I could bash their heads together, actually. So perhaps rugby's not as bad, but they need to think about the wider game, because cricket is king. Football is king virtually everywhere. And they need to have a playoff situation, I think. Because Rianne is right. You have to have something to aspire to. And if you're not playing against the best, how are you going to become the best? So I think a double header relegation game, except that's 2 more games for the country involved in that. And looking at the past, it wouldn't always have been Italy in their 21 years. They did finish bottom more often than not, but not always. So is there some thinking there for the other teams that have finished bottom of that league? But the trouble is, do companies think about the wider game? You know, there's Premiership Rugby are closing for a season because of COVID. Totally get that.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be a precursor to closing full stop. They're a company. They're not going to think about all those teams underneath them. And that is where I think we have a problem. We're talking about a money-making organisation, aren't we?
We are, and getting them to change any bit of their pie. They want to expand their pie, not sort of relinquish any bit of it down. When you look at the Six Nations all-time table, so Italy have got the wooden spoon 14 out of the 19 seasons that they have been playing in it. This was last year's one, obviously. Excuse me. So it is a bit daunting when you see it. Money is the root of everything. We need to find a happier medium to be able to try and do something. Joe Lyons, an option is to have a development team in the EPC. I think it's the Europeans, professional rugby, I think it's talking about. That would be country specific. So Georgia would have a development team, as would Spain, Romania, blah, 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 Fiji. This would develop in European and then in Super Rugby as well. This would develop a player pool and ability for those countries to be competitive. Again, very interesting stuff going on in the Southern Hemisphere now. You know, you've got Super Rugby Australia, you've got Super Rugby Aotearoa. It's all, there's potential here globally, I think, more than we've ever had. But we need to, I think World Rugby needs to work with these a lot more to put some pressure on to be able to say that. When we looked at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 rugby, it was development of it, which is all tied in. And one of the conclusions we came away with was that tier 1 teams should be shadowing a tier 2 and a tier 3 team. And should be, you know, it's all about time though, isn't it? Because everything is crammed so many games. You know, at the moment we can't travel, but once the world is back, you know, in some semblance of normality, having a tier 1 team who sponsors, if you like, a tier 2 and a tier 3 team, and shares kit with them or sponsors them for kit and gets their coaches across as part of, like, imagine going to in the Southern Hemisphere, any of the teams going to train. So the coaching staff from one of the minnow side in the Southern Hemisphere going to be trained and train with the All Blacks, you know, or Australia or South Africa. And the same in the Northern Hemisphere. Imagine, you know, Georgia or Romania going to England or to Ireland and stuff. There has been small bits of that. And Eddie's actually, in fairness, has done some of that stuff in the past, but it's not enough, and it's not formalized. And